Order. Welcome everyone to the International Development Committee's session. We are fortunate to have Minister Baroness Chapman in front of us and Melinda, the Director. Which department are you Director of now?
I'm Director General for Global Issues.
Brilliant. We'll get into why I have to ask you that, because I know that the structure is changing. We're specifically asking questions around our inquiry into the future of UK aid and development. But Minister, there's so much going on in the world right now that you understand that we'll go to probably some country-specific or policy-specific areas as well on that that are current rather than just forward-looking. If I could start, I'm interested in the sort of the philosophical shift the government is making from grants to expertise. I believe we've just got the response back finally on the committee's inquiry into value for money.
Yes.
So how and why are you making those shifts? And from a value for money point of view, how are you going to ensure that we get value for money if we're moving away from the status quo?
Okay, I mean, hopefully the letter explains the value for money approach that we came and spoke about when you did your inquiry, so hopefully that will be dealt with. But the grants to expertise is quite fundamental. It's something, when I first got this job, sort of looking at what we were doing and how much of it was programming or working with partners to deliver services, and looking at the shift that I think it's fair was already taking place to doing more technical assistance, so working with countries to do the things that were important to them, so that, you know, an example I always use is around education, where countries say they want to take more responsibility, they want to determine how kids are taught, where they're taught, and they want to design their own curriculum, they want to have their own teaching profession, to provide opportunities for employment, and they want to just take control, as I think, you know, any of us can understand and relate to. And the right way for a country like the UK to help a country on that journey, where you can, and it's not always possible, I absolutely understand that, but in more and more places this is the right way to work, then we are able, because of the expertise that we have and because of our public education system, to provide a great deal of advice and expertise on how you train a teacher, on safeguarding in the classroom, on the use of technology, on curriculum design, on transition, on assessment, all of these things. And we can get our professional teachers, we can get our education advisors, our universities working together with a country so that they can improve their own systems and deliver their own education systems for their children. And that's better in the long term than us showing up and providing education to a population where they don't have much control over it. We might be using local teaching staff, we might not. And I think that shift is it's happened slowly, and there is still a need, as I say, to have, where there are places where you need emergency education, like that, you know, someone's just got to get in there and provide the service, because those kids need to be educated here and now, and you don't have time. But when you do have time, and you've got the opportunity, and a government that wants to work on this, then I think for the United Kingdom, providing that expertise and working more in partnership is the more modern, long-term, sustainable thing to do. So that's what grants to expertise means and why it's important.
How do you prevent it becoming terribly colonial and we know best and we're going to come and tell you what to do because we're the experts?
Well, if you do that, then in the end they don't listen, do they? Because no one wants to be treated like that, and that's not a relationship, that's not a partnership that I would recognise. And, you know, if it's not working for the country, then they won't, you know, it won't work. It has to be done on more equal terms, where we properly take the time to understand what their priorities are, what, you know, where they are at the moment, what's their vision, where do you need to start? Are we starting with early years, starting with primary? Do they want to focus more on technical education? There are countries now that are really worried about the number of young people they have who don't have prospect of good employment. They want to work on what we would call further and higher education. So you've got to start in a real spirit of partnership, and that's something that, again, I think the UK can do well. And you know, maybe you could say some other countries don't have as good a track record of working in that way, but I feel quite passionately that that's something that we can and should do.
Let me give you an example. You spoke about education, and you spoke about working with the government. There are some governments that we have a close working relationship with that have no regard for girls' education, education for people from different castes or minorities or religious groups. So without having the grants that you could maybe give to civil society groups to do a pilot to prove to the government that providing education for those sorts of people is the right thing and does benefit the country, how will you ever change systems?
Well, you might still need to do some of that. So
will there still be the money to do some of that?
There will be some money to do some of that in the places where that's what you have to do. So, I mean, the example that probably springs to the front of most people's minds would be Afghanistan. And it is likely that is what we would have to do in that situation. But the other thing you can do is part of the process of building an education system alongside in partnership is make the case for why actually failing to educate adequately 50% of your population is not in the long-term interests of your economy. And those discussions are hard. But the other thing I would say is you wouldn't deal with a policy area like education in isolation. So somewhere, I don't know, like Pakistan, we're working with civil society groups, not to give them great sums of money to go and provide a service, but to work with them on advocacy skills and ways of building a voluntary sector sort of infrastructure network to enable them to be able to lobby their government in a really effective way to make a difference to domestic policy on these sorts of issues. This stuff is really long term. Like, you know, this isn't a sort of get in there, do a project, there's a result. You know, the whole system's changed. This is a long term approach. But I think it's the right way, responding to your point on not wanting to be sort of neo-colonialist about it. And in some respects, it's how you get the sustained change that means that we're not having the same conversations about the same places in 20 years' time.
Thank you. James.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks for coming. To what extent have there been conversations and discussions with other government departments about this shift from grants to expertise, and what have those conversations look like?
So there have been, and that's been, I think, initially I thought this was going to be really challenging because everyone says, oh, Cross Whitehall is really hard to pull together. But I think we're doing quite well with this. So we ran the allocations process from FCDO, where we spoke to DCIT, DEFRA, DESNES, Home Office, Department of Health, I think that's all of them, about how much ODA they would get to make decisions about. And that was relatively collegiate. There were some tough conversations, but we got to an agreement. We didn't need to have Number 10 or the Treasury intervene in that, so that was really good. One of the good things that brought about was minister-to-minister conversations with other teams and senior official discussion about what this was really for. And alongside that, we've reworked what was called the ODA board, which I think used to meet once a year, and I hope I'm not being unfair, but was a bit of a everybody come, say what you're doing is great, go away and do it again next year. We've shifted away from that, and we have open book with other departments, so we've all committed that everyone can see what everyone else is doing. The point of that is to minimise the risk of duplication or cross-cutting activity, so to stop this issue that has been the case in the past, where our team in country would not know what DEFRA was spending in that country, so they couldn't get a diplomatic benefit from it. And it just makes us look uncoordinated as the UK. It's just not good enough. So we're going to deal with all of that. And we have just finished work on a Cross Whitehall research and development strategy for our ODA spend. And I've done that alongside Patrick Vallance, and that's involved Department of Health, DESNES and DCIT, and it's been really good. It's been an opportunity for sort of challenge across departments. We've agreed principles of how we're going to work, and the next phase of that is when we need to look at our climate finance and sort of take the same approach to make sure that there's some coherence across what we're doing, and again, we're not duplicating. Everyone knows what's what and why we're doing things, and just to bring a bit more cohesion to the whole thing.
Minister, could I just interject there?
Yeah.
You've now, not you personally, the government has removed a specific disability minister. Is that a deprioritisation of our commitment to supporting people with disabilities both in the UK and around the world, or does that fit under someone else's brief now?
I'm not aware that was a decision that came anywhere near the FCDO, but I wouldn't read across from that to any ODA priorities. I mean, we're having to make our own choices and prioritise.
Does disability fall under your portfolio or one of the other?
As far as ODA spend, I'm responsible for ODA spend across Whitehall.
You can give us assurances that you will keep a close eye that those with disabilities are still getting the support that they need.
I can't promise you that we won't be making any changes to any programmes, but I can promise you that we will be continuing to monitor it, and I'll give you a personal assurance that this is important to me, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, James.
No problem, Chair. You mentioned there the delivery and impact boards, which I think is the one that you're saying has changed.
It's the ODA board. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's the same one.
Okay, cool.
So will that meet in the future?
Yeah.
And how often will that meet?
So we're working through exactly how often it will meet. I think once a year means it can't do its job. Yeah. And we've had so far most of the meetings. We've had one to set up sort of terms of reference and agree how we're going to work. We've had several meetings with DESNES, DEFRA and me around COP and some of the climate issues. We've had meetings with to do the research and development piece. They've worked really well. We now need to take that back to the ODA board in full, and I think we've got a meeting scheduled in the next few weeks to do that. But we do need to work out what the natural rhythm of these things is, because it's a high commitment thing to get all these ministers from different departments together and to service this. So it shouldn't meet for nothing, but it is the main way that we are going to get accountability and coherence across Whitehall. So it really matters. But what I'm determined to do is make sure that it considers things of substance. It makes decisions, and that is where we hold each other to account, and we do that for real. We don't just kind of sign things off for an easy life. This is to be a place of proper challenge, debate, and changing decisions if we need to.
And are those terms of reference in the public domain?
I don't see why they're not. Yeah, I believe so.
I'm sure we'd like to see a copy and understand.
If they're not, I don't see why we can't get it to you.
Okay, thank you for that. And to what extent do you think that the success of this shift from grants to expertise, to what extent do you see that as being dependent on engagement with other departments, or do you think that will be achievable in its own right?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think it does depend on engagement with other departments, but it's actually wider than that because when we say a community of expertise, we're not just talking about government departments, we're talking about the tech sector, universities. Pharmaceuticals, world service. All of these players have expertise to share, and there's a sort of nerd-to-nerd diplomacy that seems to work. So if you're wanting to do something on health, you're probably much more likely to listen to someone who's got professional expertise than a health advisor at the FCDO who may be able to broker it and add value in that way. But I do think this needs to be a sort of Team UK community of expertise rather than just government.
Minister, can I give you a specific? And I declare an interest. I chair the APPG Ocean.
Right.
And one of the issues that we have with Ocean is it cuts across all different departments. So marine protection helps fishing people, but it's also a trade issue, but it's also with the wind farms coming in the oceans, it's a DESNES issue. ODA has been fantastic on its Blue Planet work, but unless all of these departments are working together, one is literally tripping up the other. So, for example, since the 80s, 98% of our cod stock has gone. Is that the sort of thing that one of the ministers that sits around the table would bring and say, look, this is something that cuts across, we need to get a solution here, we need to get a strategy here? Is it that sort of granular that you come with?
I mean, it can be.
Can you take oceans then, please?
Because we actually have done that.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly that. And the challenge you described, Chair, is exactly right, that there are within this areas that cut right across government. Oceans is one, elements of climate are another, energy is another. But that's the nature of the global goods part of development, I suppose. And so the process the Minister describes does the sort of ODA part of it, but it also does the strategy part of it. So we're trying to sort of aim for the right outcome across both. And also, of course, our special reps on climate and nature, Rachel and Ruth, are quite often observing all of this for us and giving us guidance in their thoughts. And Ruth, for her part, Ruth Davis, has really focused down on oceans and agriculture and forestry to sort of at least critique where we're getting it wrong in terms of coherence.
Chair, can I in terms of like the shifter expertise, what will you be putting in place in terms of monitoring its effectiveness or its successes? What's your plans?
So we're going to run it through communities of expertise, so it will be sort of groups that work together, and the idea is that these will be sort of often multidisciplinary so that we can benefit from different areas of knowledge. And I think the sorts of things, I mean, Melinda can speak to exactly how we'll monitor the data, but it will be done just like we do with anything else that we do. You know, there will be a programme design, a business case will be made, then the intervention will happen, it will be monitored, it will be adapted mid-process should it need to be. If we feel we're not getting the traction or the impact isn't happening, we can withdraw, or we can shift to, a government might think it wants a certain thing, we might realise actually you've got a big rule of law issue here that's holding back your growth objectives that you wanted to work with us on. Let's deal with this first. So it needs to have that flexibility included, but it is important that we don't just do this work and forget that actually measuring impact and finding ways of doing that hold up are really important.
That's right, and I think the challenge with moving to evidence for system strengthening is that it's harder to monitor the system that you're changing. It's easy to monitor how many people you're reaching, but if you're trying to improve an education system or an economic policy or a health financing system, you have to go through many more layers to think about where are we going to be most helpful in terms of our evidence that we're marshalling and how we're marshalling it, and what are the policy changes that we're looking for, and how many people does that policy change impact. So it's incumbent on us to think through better MEL strategies, monitoring and evaluation strategies. But it's more likely to be successful and sustainable in the long run, because you're not just saying, well, we reached, 300,000 students. You're saying we've affected a policy which is going to cover the whole region or the whole country.
Okay.
Thank you. Sam?
Thanks. One of the other sort of conceptual shifts that I think we're seeing is from bilateral aid to multilateral aid. And I don't know whether that's a philosophical shift or it's just an inevitability when aid cuts are as drastic as they are. But I wonder if you could tell us sort of the philosophy behind it, and also speak to that in the context of the UK soft power, because there's a bit of a paradox to me that on the one hand we want to increase our presence overseas and increase UK influence and soft power, but one of the best ways we've been doing that is through the thing that we're cutting back the deepest.
Well, what other countries do is they calculate the amount of their contribution to something like IDA or Gavi, and they tell that country that that's part of their contribution to their country. We don't do that, or we haven't for a long time, and I think we might want to think about that because I think it's important for transparency and there's a diplomatic benefit to doing it. But there are several reasons why that shift is taking place. One of them is, in some cases, the multilateral system is coming under threat, and we can have a very long discussion about why that might be. But we feel that there are some agencies that we really want to back. So, the Global Fund and what it does on HIV, malaria and TB, we think is really important. It's a good buy. There's a critical mass issue around this. If we didn't take part, how viable is it really? If big donors like us don't back these things, then that becomes questioned. So there's that sort of reason to be in. You get to operate at scale. So IDA, with the World Bank, massive. You're able to make big changes that way. They have a wide geographical spread. They've got good expertise, good relationships. There's a stake from very many other countries. We also get, because we're big contributors and we've got an excellent team in Washington, we get to influence what the World Bank does in a way that other countries can't. So their fragile and conflict-affected states strategy, I have never had a conversation with RJ Bangman, I've had many, where I haven't talked about that. And he would tell you that, because we are absolutely determined that an organisation set up in the way that was, at the size that is, should be active in those places. There is debate at the bank about whether or not and to what extent they should be. We've got a clear view and we use our status there to argue for it. So that's another reason. Another thing is, a good example of this would be the African Development Bank and the fund that we made our commitment to in December, with the biggest donor to it, the African Development Fund. This is African-led. It is something that they take huge pride in. It's really well run and effective. It leverages in additional money. So every pound we put in, they get in, I think, another 5. And it's able to operate in places that we and other agencies find really difficult. So one example would be the sort of conflict-affected areas of Sudan, where they can work through local partners, providing services that no one else can do because of the relationships that they have and because they're African-led. So there are lots of good reasons to work in a way which is, it's through the multilateral system, but it's a way of, it's not just about the money, it's about the arguments that it enables you to have and the leadership that it gives us the platform to undertake. There is a cost, like you say, that means that there is less to spend bilaterally. But I think, it's a very long time since the UK was so big in a country where our bilateral ODA programming was the thing that would make a country do something. We just haven't been at that scale for a while, and we shouldn't be. We should be working more in partnership. And, it always, I have to remind myself, because sometimes with these conversations, you would think that nearly all the international money flowing into low middle income countries was ODA, and it really isn't. It's about 7%. About 3% of the GNI of Africa is ODA. The rest of it's coming through, FDI. Too much is coming through debt, by the way. That is a whole other thing that we probably do want to talk about. But, our ability to influence isn't about the size of your ODA programme. It's about, it can be about that, and historically maybe more so, but it's much more about your diplomatic work, your political connections. The role that you play in the multilateral space really matters to a lot of these countries. They know who the big donors are to Gavi and the Global Fund. They see it, and they see what we do at the UN. So that, all of that together has led me to the place where I think that actually shifting to a greater extent, we still are going to have a substantial amount of money going through other programmes, but having more of a proportion of our spend going through those big organisations is the best thing we can do to get the impact that we want, and it makes a statement about who the UK is.
Can I just ask a couple of follow-up questions? Yeah, I appreciate the I thought it was a very good defence of the multilateral system, and there's no question the value of that. But I suppose two quick questions. One is, when it does come though to that sort of bilateral UK relationship, what's likely to have more impact, a UK aid programme and partnership with the country, or simply telling them, by the way, we contributed to this pot of money that somebody else controls? But also, it's not just about government-to-government relationships, it's also about the world that we live in. And prior to my life as a Member of Parliament, I spent a lot of time living amongst the world's poorest and listening to their attitudes to the world. And I think it would surprise a lot of British people the degree to which billions of people around the world look to China, to India, to countries that don't share our values as the more natural allies of their country than they do to us, because UK aid is becoming so invisible to them. And do you see that as a problem?
That's not because China has an amazing ODA programme. That's because they've invested, and we can have a conversation about the nature of that investment. And I think more and more you're hearing from countries that they recognise a potential dependency that is a consequence of that, and they do not want to fall foul of it, and they want to spread their partnerships, and they're very interested in talking to us principally about helping them do things like helping them raise more revenue domestically, so how they can improve their own tax base to pay for their own services, to give them control, because in the end, development for many countries is about how they gain control.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's to make their own choices, and they don't want to be beholden to us any more than they want to be beholden to China or anyone else. They want that sovereignty, but the way that China's gone about it in the past isn't the kind of way that we would ever want to do this. Having said all that, we have got a development dialogue with China, which we're just embarking upon, because I think there's a recognition, perhaps within China themselves, and I'm not here to speak for them, that actually they need to evolve their approach, because there is a consequence of some of the, reputationally, of some of the ways of working that have taken place in the past.
But I think that is my concern though, is that where the USA and the UK has vacated spaces and China and other actors have moved in, they're the ones building not just the aid relationships but the trade relationships with those countries where we've pulled out. And actually, given that we do have values of democracy and treating workers with fairness and so on, wouldn't it be a good thing if the UK was to have those trading relationships and aid relationships that China's developing?
I think trade relationships, absolutely, and we've recently reworked our developing countries trading scheme, because I agree with you on that. I think countries don't really want an aid relationship in that way, in a way that they may have done in the past. I think that's changing, and we've got to listen to that. And one of the things that the reasons we did our revised Africa approach in December was to reflect what African countries have said to us about what they want this relationship to look like. And they want to, it's this whole thing about getting beyond aid, and making sure that, one of the things that's said to me is, oh, well, if you used your ODA money, we could get countries to do things that we want. And I'm just like, we're nowhere near big enough to be in that place. But what we can have is really good conversations about sort of rule of law, human rights, trade, regulating communications. One of the big conversations countries want to have is about regulation and standards, because they recognise that if you want to trade globally, you have to have that, because you're going to be blocked, or trade's going to be very, very difficult unless you have those things. And they really want to work with us on those issues. You don't do that through a big ODA programme, but you definitely do that with sharing expertise and knowledge and experience
Minister,
we have.
I've got both Monica and James that quickly want to come in on this point, I think.
Thank you for coming, Minister. So when you talk on that vein to, for example, Norway, they will push back on that, and they will say we maintain our aid at the current levels because of the moral imperative, but also because it's useful for our influence, and that's where they want to be. And surely there is something, although it's not a direct relationship between trade and aid, surely those relationships and the soft power and influence that aid gives us, especially being preeminent in those areas, is really important to the UK. And I use the example of the Sahel, for example, that looks like it's going to be cut quite dramatically. One of your PUSs, when they appeared in front of us, said, well, the French have been doing lots in the Sahel and pouring money in for a long time. They didn't achieve anything. So the kind of message seems to be, we may as well all go home then. So I'm sure that wasn't the intention of what he meant. But my point is, in a place like Africa, for example, that is a huge emerging market where I think is it 60% or under 25. Why wouldn't we do as much as we can bilaterally with nations in order to not only the moral imperative, I'd say, but also to extend our influence?
You could do that. I mean, if that was your overriding objective from your ODA programme, and this is not what I think Norway is doing, by the way, but if we did that and we said that this is all about UK influence and we want to use our ODA programme to buy that, I'm out. You know, that's not what I want to do. I'm about alleviating poverty and stabilising countries to enable them to go on that journey themselves, and that's what I believe in, and that's what I think our ODA programme should be for. Now, yes, you could carry on doing that bilaterally if you wanted to, and we haven't only done it bilaterally, I don't think, ever, but that is a choice. But you would be missing out on all the money you would leverage in through investment. You would miss out on influencing the billions that other countries put in as well, where we're using our influence in a way over far, far greater sums of money than we would if we only have influence over our own. So if you're happy with that, fine, you could take that approach, but that is not my understanding. That's not what I believe ODA is for.
James?
Mine was just a specific question, which is the multi-year ODA allocations, have they been published yet?
No, not yet.
When will they be published? Because I
Soon
think it's
as
been
possible.
several months.
I know. I really want them to be published. I mean, we're almost done. One of the things, I think you
Minister,
probably...
we have heard this quite a bit.
Yeah, I know. And you're right to push back. But one of the reasons it's delayed a little bit longer is we did get the latest equalities impact assessments back, and I wanted to make a few more changes. And that will all become clear, and we will publish those assessments alongside.
So that was women, girls, what was...
Exactly, no, that's exactly right. So it's done, but it needs to just be, we're not quite ready, but I'm hoping it's very, very soon. And I know I said that last time.
And they're multi-year for how long?
3 years.
For 3 years.
Yeah.
Minister, my heart is swelling at the thought that an equalities impact assessment has been done in advance.
Responded to.
Yes.
And responded to.
You will see the working.
Good.
Okay.
I'm dumbfounded that the last government retrospectively did it and then told us that the majority of cuts were falling on women and girls. Thank you. Sam?
Actually, if I may just continue one more on this thread, actually, it's to ask about. I understand your point that often an African government, for example, will tell you that they don't want aid. Okay.
Not quite like that.
Yes, but
yeah.
But I suppose what they don't want actually is interference. And I do understand that, but many of the places that are the poorest in the world also are sort of weak and fragile states with weak governance, and where the population doesn't always have a say in running their country.
Yeah.
Do you see an importance nonetheless in making sure that we get aid to the people in those positions who are vulnerable and voiceless and aren't able to shape the decisions that affect their lives?
No, I mean, that's a really good point. And when we've done our allocations, we have tried to prioritise, where programming goes in places where it really is needed. And there are things that we've been doing in the past, which if you took the sort of purest, completely absolute, just cold hard logic of what I've said, you would be withdrawing from certain things, and we've, because of the assessments, put them back in, because the idea that that system could be strengthened quickly enough to be able to deliver just was not realistic. So we've not been completely dogmatic about it. And that's another reason as well why we do continue to work through UN agencies as well, because to deliver at scale in some of the places you're thinking about, and that's what you need to be able to do. And we'll work through ICRC and IRC and others as well, because they're able to get to those people. Because you're right, I mean, what we're arguing, I think, is the right thing in general terms, but there will always be places where that's not realistic.
I think just to complete the response, so the original question was about the shift to multilateral. We still have a large bilateral envelope, and actually the shift in percentage terms, you'll see when the allocations are published, isn't such a great swing that we've not thought about that bit. And so the shift to work more with evidence and expertise is part of how we then think about how we apply soft power bilaterally. And of course, another of the development shifts is to work more through local organisations to do what you described there, which is to make sure that we're getting to the people who need it most and not going through the layers of the sort of different systems.
Delighted to hear that. I wasn't aware that was one of the shifts, actually, to push to more local, but that,
yes.
Okay.
So that's sort of how we're interpreting soft power in the bilateral envelope of the aid.
Okay.
But I think the other point to respond to Monica is our heads of mission are tasked in country to do exactly what you described, to think about how we pull together all the levers to advance bilaterally the partnership and the relationship with the government, of which development and trade and investment are parts. And so that's part of the integration theory, that if we get that bit right, then we can be much greater than some of our parts through country plans, and all the levers are pulling in the same direction. It's been bumpy along the way, as you've heard in this committee, but that point that you make about how we represent as the UK, how we show up as the UK, and how we deal with partners is very much at the forefront of our minds when we're doing those country strategies.
Yes, so can I push you a little bit around the World Bank? So I was really surprised when we increased our ODA by 40%, and I don't know if we would have done that under your watch or not. And I agree, the staff that we've got over there are absolutely phenomenal, and whenever we meet them, they're really inspiring, really influential. But I would imagine that they would fill a minibus versus the 20-odd thousand people that are in the World Bank. So realistically, how much influence do we have? But more specifically, what is it that you're trying to influence? What are the outcomes that you're not seeing at the moment that you want to see in the future? And how realistic is it that we can achieve that, even with an uplift?
I thank you for saying what you did about the team at the World Bank.
They're brilliant.
I agree, they are, and they punch way above their weight. And the way that they do that is they are building relationships with the right people. And I guess that the obvious example for me is about the... so I have a conversation on repeat with Ajay Banga about we're not a humanitarian organisation, we're a development organisation. And I say, yes, but... you need to get yourselves into these fragile conflict-affected states, because while you're not doing humanitarian work, you're doing development work, you can do it in those places. And actually the two, I think the two overlap far, far more than you would think from some of the conversations that are had. And in some countries they're dealt with they're completely different. That's not how we think. And we've been successful. You can see in the most recent strategy that the World Bank have published on fragile states that is demonstrably different because of the influence of the UK. We're also able to work, we don't just go out there, champion the things we think are important and hope for the best. We build coalitions with others there as well who are sort of like-minded on various issues. The two that have come under most threat, I think, of late would be gender and climate, where we've been very clear what we think and what we expect, and have been able to act as a counterweight to some of the other pressures upon the bank. So, but I think we need to do more. I think there will be, making sure that the World Bank is present in places where it may not be if we weren't there, making the argument. I think there is a lot more that we can do, but because of the success we've had over the last year in this and with those strategies, I'm quite confident that we can continue to do that.
Minister, we're a load of development geeks and we're not aware of that. So how is my constituent in Rotherham meant to be aware of that and proud of that, and therefore be campaigning that we do keep our development money?
That's a really big, much bigger question about how, as a government, we talk to the citizens of this country about the important work that they're paying for and why they should continue to pay for it, I guess.
We probably want to come on to that into more detail, but how are, with the specific of the World Bank, how are you, let's
we're doing it badly, I think. We are making a shocking job of this. I think most of my former constituents in Darlington, and including me, until sort of a few years ago, probably wouldn't have been able to explain to you what the World Bank was, what it did and why it existed. And I think that is something that the government, has a role in doing a much better job of talking about. But I think if you just leave that to the government, probably not going to be that successful. And I have this conversation with NGOs quite frequently, and there are some brilliant pieces of work being done by the One Campaign and others, and Global Citizen, on trying to get into this issue about how we talk about development in a way that means something and is up to date. And I just don't think we've cracked it. I think we need to really challenge ourselves on this, because I just don't think we're doing this well enough at all.
Minister, this is the most clarity we've got from you about why you're prioritising the multilaterals, and committee members may agree or disagree, but at least you're giving us something. My frustration is there is a clear shift to this. It's not just, it could be, as you've already said, the Global Fund, Gavi, UN agencies in general. That isn't being communicated to this committee. So the assumption that we make is that, it's an easy way to get rid of the money, and by association get rid of the project staff. So I'm wrong in that assumption, am I?
Yeah, you are wrong in that assumption, but I have to think about the fact that was your assumption. That tells me that there's something that I should be doing. And I already know that the government doesn't communicate well on this issue. Obviously, it's brilliant at communicating everything else at all times. But I think there is a genuine challenge here.
Debate me.
There is a genuine challenge here. I don't think the government doesn't have the answer to this. I don't think anybody really does. And it's not just our challenge. It is for the whole sector to
Minister,
really ask itself
if you're
how
not
it's going to
making
do it
it clear
better.
to the committee that's meant to be scrutinising
No, I think you're right.
how on earth can the rest of the country understand what we're doing and support it? David,
entirely fair.
Give me next question.
Just on another point that you raised, and it goes on to what Monica was bringing up. Is there, I know you haven't published your spending, but are there going to be particular areas that the UK can champion and that we can all be really proud of? I'm thinking, the Norwegian Refugee Council do an amazing job. Qatar does an amazing job on convening for peace. I'm thinking there are small specific things that no one's interested in, like neglected tropical diseases, atrocity prevention. We're in a prime place to be able to do something on private debt relief. So are you looking to have something that is the UK's specific offer?
I think we'll have a list of things. Definitely private finance and getting international money flowing into the global south. We are uniquely placed to do that, I think. There will be things like mine clearance, where we have a great track record, and I think the nation wants to see us continue to do that. Health generally. We have a great deal of expertise and knowledge, not just in the sort of the R&D science vaccine development, but how you deliver health interventions at scale to a population. So there will be things, and we said initially we wanted to prioritise health, climate and humanitarian. But then I think, so that's sort of where we are now, but I think there is a question about where we go next and whether we want to look at really expanding the work that we do on private capital mobilisation and the sort of public markets work, but also technology. and whether or not the UK, and I don't think this is a decision the government takes on its own. The government has a convening role and a leadership role here, but we need to be saying to the sector, who's in, who wants to, because I'm getting some really positive messages from the city and from finance in particular about wanting to be more active and wanting to sort of take seriously their responsibilities as global citizens. And I think that's something that any decent government really needs to think, how do we enable this? Not how do we sort of take it and we do it, but how do we create the infrastructure and an ecosystem here that really facilitates that kind of work.
Let's try and get into some of the specifics of that if we can. Tracy.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. What reprioritisation, geographically or thematically, focus has taken place since we've had a change in Foreign Secretary since Vet Cooper's taken on a role?
In geography?
Geographically or thematically?
Which, I mean, Yvette's very, very clear about violence against women and girls, and she feels strongly about it, and she wants to see that reflected in the work that, in the end, she's responsible for. So we'll make sure that happens. But we're having a development conference in the first half of this year, and she wants that to be a key thread. And it's absolutely right. So we'll do that. She's also looking at how migration, how we work to reduce some of these horrific journeys, which see people exploited and die on those routes, and how and this isn't, this is, some of it can be about odour, but actually a lot of this is about how we combine our diplomatic and political and other connections as well to try and make change.
You've spoken previously about mainstreaming across the women and girls with ODA and spend.
Yeah.
Have you got a clear idea about how those issues are going to actually be mainstreamed now and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think, and the mainstreaming approach is going to have to happen with development generally, I think, as well. But we have, because we've had to make, and there's no getting away from the fact that if you cut 40% of your budget, you've got to prioritise, otherwise you just end up doing loads of things really badly. And I think that the way we deal with the fact that we've had to do that and protect our work on gender is to make sure that it's something that we have much more widespread sort of training and skills and awareness of, and that the way that we measure and assess our interventions and score for gender is done well, and we require more of our programmes to have that element to them, because we just couldn't afford to carry on doing all of the things that we were before. So we have to make sure that gender is accounted for in a different way, and that's, hopefully, when we looked at the impact assessments, we haven't disproportionately hit women and girls. That was really, really important. We have managed that. But this isn't a kind of one and done. You've got to keep the focus and keep the pressure on teams to make sure that doesn't slip at all. I don't know.
Yeah, if I can jump in to complete the answer. So we also have Harriet Harman, who's,
yes,
as you know, the special representative, and the work that we've done with her has been about the issue of how do you mainstream across development, but also how do you use your political levers and actively vocally back change agents in country who have legitimacy. So again, it's how we work across all the tools that we've got in country to really push forward on movements, people, priorities that are going to make a difference. And as part of that, there's a refresh of our international strategy on women and girls, where we'll set the plan is to set some of that out.
What's the timescale of that?
TBC, but over the next couple of
there will be
as soon as possible.
5 now that are ongoing or commissioned, is it? 5 different strategy reviews.
The others being?
I can't remember, but if you give me a minute, then we can get them pulled up for you.
So I think what we've wanted to do with this one, when we've been in conversation with ministers, is to not simply just do a rollover of what we've said previously, but rather use the moment of having Harriet Harman and Baroness Chapman and the Foreign Secretary, who are all passionate about these issues, really look hard at what it is we're trying to affect in this world in the context of the rollback and get it right. That's true of the Women and Girls strategy. It's also true of the violence against women and girls policy.
In the context of the World Bank?
In the context of the rollback.
Rollback, sorry.
Rollback.
Rollback on women's rights?
Yeah.
Okay.
The point is that this is a different environment now within which we've got to put a strategy and priorities forward and a plan for how we'll do mainstreaming, but also how we will do the political piece, the lobbying, the campaigning, the focus points, linked as much to what we're thinking about domestically as what we need to do internationally, making our statements very watertight, making sure our programmes are following through on that. So it needs to be thoroughly done.
Can I ask, that's great, there's going to be a plan and there's a strategy, and I look forward to seeing that. Do you have any kind of timeline on what that looks like? Or I know you said to be confirmed, but do we have any idea of what that looks like?
We've already done a first round of it, so I think within a couple of months.
Okay. And you said about the measures that they have to change to see what that looks like to make sure that this is working across the new strategy. Could you tell some practical things that what does that look like in terms of those changes to measure it and collecting data and the impact of the same?
Scoring.
So there are two things. One is how we look at the impact through our ODA spend according to the markers relating to gender. So we need to understand how it's impacting women and girls, the amount of resource that we can attribute to that using the OECD, what they call the DAC gender markers. So that's an important part of getting that right. There's also a consideration of how much of the totality of our bilateral spend we want to make is sort of focused on gender, where we're looking at the proportion that we've had previously and whether that's right and whether we can increase it. But then in the political space and the campaigning space, then that's a different set of indicators, because that's more about countries' legislation, the cultural impacts, which are very hard to measure, the number of women who are involved in politics, women's economic empowerment, and that's more about understanding what the indicators and how they're changing means for a country's trajectory. So that's more at the macro level. So we have to do both.
I've got James, then I've got Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. You mentioned migration, which I was pleased to hear, because I think it was December when we started to hear that this was kind of emerging as a newer priority. I think it was with Bangladesh that there was evidence that ODA was going to be used to effectively ask the Bangladeshis to curb migration. Is that not correct? That was what the Independent reported.
I know. I went to Bangladesh and had a really good conversation with Professor Yunus, and it was the key to unlocking that was nothing to do with ODA whatsoever. I mean, I was there to visit refugee camps and visited a lot of programming. The key to it was sharing information with Bangladesh so they could see the numbers of people, the visa decisions that were being taken, how many people were overstaying and claiming asylum. Once we shared all that information in the spirit of collective sort of partnership, we were able to secure what we needed. So actually the sort of Bangladesh example really proves that it isn't just about your ODA programming. And I think that it astonishes me really that in the past we've been prevented from sharing information with countries until I think about just over a year ago. I was having this exact issue with Brazil, and we were able to, once we got into a place where we could share data, it opens so many doors because governments feel respected and they don't feel that we're sort of targeting them and picking on them for some reason. They understand why it is we're concerned.
So am I right in saying then ODA is not being tied to migration in any way?
It's not tied to migration. I mean, there may be things in some places where if we can work... I think one of the things that we've failed to do on migration is to properly understand in a particular place for a particular group of people, what is it that's going on there that's making this happen? And we try and have these interventions that we apply across the board in Vietnam, in Eritrea, and then we go, oh, it's not working. Well, it's because it's so context specific. So understanding what's happening, who it is, what's driving it, what their government's role it could be, what might happen. Are there things around livelihoods that we can do? Is there something around alternative routes that people can take? Looking at all of this in a place-specific way is what I think. That's where I can add some value to this. The Home Office will do what Home Office needs to do, and we now have a regular meeting between me and Alex Norris, where we look at a different route, different situation each time. And I think Minister Norris is in Turkey at the moment, or was last week. We're trying to look at this in a much more sort of pragmatic, solution-focused way. And if that sometimes involves odour, great. But experience is starting to show that actually that is usually not the case.
Or just part of it.
Exactly.
And so you said then for the Foreign Secretary, though, you mentioned migration as being kind of a part of the new priorities. So just succinctly, just explain what that shift is that maybe wasn't happening before.
So when I said that, I meant for the whole of the FCDO.
Yep.
And obviously, the development is a key part of it. But I think what we're learning is that there are conversations that you can have as a development minister in a country, which you're starting from a different position, that it's different to sending your security or your Home Office minister. You're starting from a slightly different premise. So that's a sort of interesting, quite instructive thing in terms of how we deploy development figures for this. But I think the work that the Foreign Office is doing on migration, some of it will be around returns agreements, legal changes in other countries, UK letters, so we can assert that someone has a particular nationality without having to get all the documents verified here before someone can be returned, visa arrangements, all of these sorts of things are probably more immediately impactful than sort of some of the longer term development work, but that is still it's still important. But you have to bring it all together.
We love prevention and early intervention, and that's
Yes.
exactly what this sounds like, and it also sounds like common sense. So all grist to your mill. I've got 3 members though that want to come in on this, so can I ask both members and with respect Minister, can we get tighter okay. answers and questions? So Brian first.
Thank you Minister. Going back to this whole issue of women and girls, it's violence against women and girls is one terrible thing, and of course we've been looking a lot at what's been going on in Sudan and the ultimate horrors that are happening there. But in terms of development, women and girls collect 70% of the water when they don't have a tap in the home. Okay, so if we want to be serious about mainstreaming that, we've got to be serious about WASH. But WASH has, for the statistics here, since between 2018 and 2023, previous government, okay, the money going to WASH has gone down by 82%. That's before all the current aid cuts, from 206 million to 37 million. I hate to think what it's going to be down to now. But surely, if we're really serious about mainstreaming women and girls, we've got to include WASH.
Yeah, no, I agree, but we don't have to always do it bilaterally. And improvements in accessibility to clean water are things that are really well delivered often multilaterally. And if you look at the African Development Bank, some of the things that it likes to focus on would be just those sorts of projects. So just because we might be spending less bilaterally, that doesn't mean that something is not critically important, or that we're using our influence to make sure that it happens, but that it should be done in a way that it's long term, and it's done in a way that sits well with the government of the country where it is, because what we don't want to be doing is spending money on what become redundant assets.
Thank you.
Then I think it's vital that it's transparent.
Of course, yeah, no, I agree. But all this information is there. It's sometimes, and I think this is something we could take away, is how this is presented, and some of the projects that are done through the multilateral system, we haven't seen it as our job to particularly highlight and promote. I think it's quite a good suggestion for us to rethink that, because to answer, the very fair point that you make.
Monica.
Can I ask, the ODA budget seems to me like a bucket that you pinch from to sort out domestic problems, but, asylum hotels, stopping migration, sorting out climate change for everyone, which is the biggest threat that's coming towards us. But at the same time, it's a bucket is being emptied and is very stretched. So my question really is, why is this? Why is it seen as easy pickings? And what is it? Is it something about the lack of support for the budget, or is it lack of clarity on what the budget is for?
I think, and this is a bit, I think the Tories mismanaged it, and I don't think, so Melinda can't get involved with this, but I think, honestly, I don't know what they were doing with their day half the time, because there was no ODA strategy across government. There was a kind of lip service meeting. No one knew what anyone else was doing. You'd have things that were not scored particularly highly when they were inspected carrying on anyway. Ministers would go on a trip, come back and say, we must do something about X, find me some money. And I think it's appalling. So I do recognise what you're saying. And one of the things that I feel like I was tasked to do by the Prime Minister was to bring some sense to all of this. And yes, we're doing it at a time that we're cutting the money, but what that's enabled, that's forced us to have that discipline to make sure we get that grip of this, so that when we do get some more money, that it is spent so much better than it has been before. Because I think, I don't know if it's been a sort of pot that you dip in, or it's been a badge that you put on stuff just to get yourself up to a certain percentage. I can't answer for the psychology of it, but I think that, if we don't get more organised across Whitehall on this, then you'll quite rightly come back to me in a couple of years and say, this is still as messy as it's ever been.
I think you're being somewhat disingenuous.
Okay,
and there is a twinkle in your eye, so I think you know what I'm going to say. Almost a year ago to the day, this government cut ODA from 0.5 down to 0.3 and very publicly gave it to defence. And at a time of such global insecurity, we were just speaking earlier about early intervention and prevention. The best method to stop people from migrating is for them to be safe, secure and prosperous in their own home. And we're taking away the very money from that and putting it into defence. We had the ministers in front of us 2 weeks ago talking about women, peace and security. And the Defence Minister wasn't saying, oh yes, and it's great, we're now going to be doing more about getting women round the peace table. They're the sort of things that we need to see. So this government has, whilst I don't know how you're internally managing it, on the absolute baseline, you've cut as much.
Yeah, sorry, my interpretation of Monica's question was about sort of how you're gripping the budget that you have. The budget that I have is the budget that I have. Would I like a bigger one? Yes.
My understanding of her question was there's a bucket of money called ODA that we seem to be taking out of it to give to different departments.
That's not what's happening. I mean, that decision on defence, that is a decision that I know is disagreed with in this committee, but I think that wasn't a case of sort of unthinkingly...
Disagreed with because the objectives that it's saying
I understand that. I understand that, but the government's perspective is that actually hard power right now matters too. And it matters diplomatically as well as it does defensively. And, you don't need me to go into the events of the last couple of weeks around this. So, would I prefer to have additional money to spend on things that I believe in? Yes. But I do understand that you can only spend it once, and there was a need to find money quickly to commit to defence. Now, my view is that means I can have some really robust conversations with defence ministers about defence attachés, how they work with our teams, the work that we're doing with governments, particularly in the Sahel, actually, where they're really worried about defence and security, number one concern. How does the UK provide support in the right way to maintain some semblance of stability in these really difficult parts of the world? That is where the fact that MOD this relationship the dynamic has changed a little bit, I think. Partly that's because of personalities and a new government. But I think that shift in spend, I feel it gives me every right to go and say...
We would support you on that, Minister.
Thank you very much. But I think we have to maintain the view that we are one team as a United Kingdom government.
Does the Prime Minister agree with you?
About what? Oh, yes, at all times. Go on. No. About what?
About that you have the right to speak to other departments.
Oh, yeah.
And that
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean I have the right to go and tell them what to do. But I'm responsible for odour spend across Whitehall. That has to be done in a really collegiate way. And I don't, I think it's really important that we do this together as a government and a team of ministers. So far, that's working really well. The SDR has set the priorities for the MOD, but they are amazingly open to conversations about how we work together. I've got views on their decisions on drawdown of defence attaches, but we talk about it, and we talk about how we navigate this.
And you agree that development is a soft power?
Of course it is, yeah. But so's diplomacy, so's politics, so's culture. It all fits together. What you haven't seen sufficiently in the past is those things aligning sufficiently, I don't think.
I agree. Stacey?
Just very quickly, just one follow-up question on terms of women and girls. When the evidence shows that for every pound we spend on women and girls, it obviously is more beneficial than any other spend that we make. It helps boys, it helps men, it helps in every day. Why is there pushback on spending the money and prioritising that money in that place?
I mean, there isn't. There's just less money. So if we can do interventions which might be on sort of nutrition, and we can make sure that, and it's not a specific standalone, this is a gender programme, but it will almost certainly primarily benefit women and girls, then that's a good programme. So that's what I mean. But so one of the purposes of the Equalities Impact Assessment process was to make sure that we don't unthinkingly, disproportionately withdraw things or make decisions that would disproportionately impact women and girls. I think we've managed to do that. Obviously we'll get sort of the final analysis and others will have their say, but what I can't say to you is that we can cut 40% of our spend and there'd be no detrimental impact on any women or any girls anywhere. It's about, is that impact disproportionately hitting that population? And that I think we can do. But so this is, it's not easy, and I'm just trying to be as open as I can with you about it.
Would you say you're a feminist development minister?
Yes.
And would you say that we're going to see a feminist development policy?
You'll see it. Yeah, I think, yes, I do. Yes.
Thank you. Monica?
What do you think are the keys to restoring public awareness and confidence in the spending of ODA?
I don't know. I mean, I speak to lots of people about this, and we've done... I read virtually everything I can on sort of public attitudes towards this. I've spoken at length to sort of More in Common and sort of pollster organisations. I think the One Campaign do an amazing job on this. I think in some ways, I think it would be a good start if we could persuade people who are inclined to support development work and who maybe contribute themselves or who have always supported, who understand the benefits to the UK of being active in this space. If we could just persuade those people that government spends its development money well, I think that would be an improvement on where we've been. I think confidence in all of this has been so utterly shattered. And part of that is because governments kind of gave up talking to the public about development some years ago. And it just hasn't, it hasn't been a positive approach. And I think we've really, one of the things I need to do this year, and one of the reasons we want to have the conference, and sort of I want to do much more sort of outward facing now we've gone through the sort of pain of what we've had to do. I think we need to think of ways of having those conversations in a way that feels fresh and different, because development has changed, because the world has changed, Africa's changing, so it's not as it was in 2005, and the things that we need to do are different. But I don't think anyone's, which goes back to the question you asked me earlier, anyone's really bothered talking to the public about that. And so, I mean, one of the reasons, partly the government hasn't bothered, but also NGOs have, and even faith organisations have, who used to be brilliant at this, but because now their relationship with their donor base is one-to-one, people are not having, you know, when I first joined Oxfam, we used to go around someone's house and have a monthly meeting and talk about whatever it was that we cared about in the world, and we'd pay our subs, and it was a community activity. I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen anymore. So how we build that network of support out in the community in this country, I think is a really important question. I don't have all the answers. I don't think ministers should pretend they do on these things, but I think that maybe our faith organisations and NGOs is something that I'd really welcome a conversation with them about.
So does the government have a strategy of its own in order to increase public perception and awareness of the good that aid can do and development?
No, we don't. Not specifically. I mean, we have comms plans and things like that. I would be really open to doing that. I sort of think, with all humility, that sometimes governments aren't the best people at changing public attitudes in these sorts of areas of policy, or at least they shouldn't attempt to do it by themselves. But I think it's really important that even if we didn't do it perfectly, that we do make a real effort this year to figure out how we articulate in a way that's kind of common sense and makes sense to people what it is that we're doing and the thinking that's gone into it. We haven't done that yet, but I think it is something we should do.
Minister, can I bring in Brian and then David, please? And then Janet.
Thank you, Minister. I'd go back to your previous points that when you talked about the need to rethink the way in which you talk to the public, but also the way in which you look at how multilateral spending impacts lives, real lives. And I can give no better example, and I should sort of give you I was at one stage country rep for water aid in Tanzania, but and I've worked with WASH all over the world, but that issue of WASH really does cut across the board. People do get it. And I think if FCDO was to play a better role in terms of getting across what it's doing in that sector, I think it would do itself some favours.
Yeah, I think WASH is really relatable. I think another one that is vaccines. And we did, I think, probably the best bit of communicating we did last year. And we didn't prioritise, I don't think, communication specifically last year, but we do need to this year, was around the Gavi replenishment, where we went to Stevenage, we went to GSK, we talked to the scientists who developed the vaccine in this country, highlighted how many UK jobs we're reliant on this, and the amazing data about lives saved through this intervention, and that I think worked really quite well. So there are things, like you say, with WASH and a few others where there's a more natural sort of way in.
David Taylor.
Thank you. I mean, I completely agree with you that NGOs have massively dropped the ball on talking about development to the public. I think, as someone who worked and had these battles at the time, they thought that we'd won. You know, we got 0.7, that was it, we could move on. And I was making the case very strongly that no, we had to keep relying on it. Unfortunately, they were kneecapped by the previous government, who took away the PPA grants, which many were using to bolster their campaign efforts. But the other thing it was doing was supporting development education in schools. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about how we might be able to support some of that coming back, because in terms of getting the next generation of young people behind development, it was such a brilliant way of doing things, and it could be integrated into the curriculum again if conversations happen with DfE?
Yeah, here.
Yeah, I mean, I've met quite a few groups of school children who wanted to talk about usually education in developing countries, but not only that. And it is really good, and it's really inspiring. I mean, I think, the other thing that went wrong wasn't just that the last government sort of did those, but they sort of actively and deliberately rubbished the agenda. And, I don't. Not everyone who was part of that government did that, and not everybody. Certainly, I know, people in the Tory party who care passionately about this. This is not, I don't want to be held to account for every view that everyone in the Labour Party has. But I think that's really sad that was allowed to happen. And we do have everyone who cares about this has a responsibility to figure out how to rebuild confidence, because it's been utterly shattered.
Minister, I think the question was, will you look at refunding something like that, because it is hugely valuable for a very sort of low financial...
Development education specifically.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, happy to look, but can't make any promises at all. And it might be something where we have a sort of wider conversation with colleagues at DfE about how things can be incorporated. Because I know loads of teachers who do this, and they sort of do it anyway. But that
just be
that
access to resources or staff time or
Specifically
online, or
it's usually, when I've seen it done well, it's where a teacher is sort of passionately involved and active in their own, and they sort of bring,
or a direct school to school kind
yeah. But let me look at it, because I think it's a really good question.
I've got Brian Mundell.
David.
Anyone.
Thank you.
I've got another person to ask you a question.
I think he's a very large-scale haulier in Argyll.
Is he now?
Yes.
I was waiting where you were going on that.
I've seen his lorries.
Have you now?
Minister, I certainly agree with you. I've spoke out strongly on this. The corporatisation of the NGOs was a real setback, because then they lost an army of advocates, individual citizens who could challenge other people that they met at social events, in other contexts on the issue, and that has been diminished, and it's very hard to see how you can actually build that back. And whilst I respect what you say in relation to the role of the government, do you not agree that the government does have a role, though, in relation to the sector in terms of stimulating debate and discussion? Because I am concerned that there's still too many people within the sector in the UK who just think that maybe next year or the year after, or shortly thereafter, it'll just go back to what it was, and that should be the focus of their efforts, essentially to lobby to a return of what they've known, when in fact, we know that's not going to be the case, even if there was more money.
Yeah.
And what was struck us, I think, when we were in the US in the last autumn, was that the sector there seemed to have accepted that things may change, but they're not going to go back to exactly what they were, and therefore, effort lobbying simply to get back to where we were is a waste, and actually is stifling innovative discussion. So, do you see yourself having a role in ensuring that we do have that sort of innovative discussion and debate here in the UK as to how we can go forward in a positive way with inevitably almost less resources?
Yeah, I really do. And I think the engagement I've had with NGOs in the UK, there's been a sort of journey to it, and it started off very angry, for understandable reasons. But I think over the months, we've sort of built a reasonably good relationship, in not all cases, but more and more. And there is a sort of, okay, what can we do? Approach to this, and a lot of the conversations we're having, we had a really good meeting via Bond with a group of NGOs just last week about the development conference, and they were feeding in ideas of discussions that they would like to have, and suggesting roles that they could play, and whether or not there could be a sort of fringe programme around this, that they could hold events and campaign, which I think is really positive. We have lots of conversations. I've had some about WASH specifically, but also about debt. And there is a real sort of appetite to do something with us on debt, recognising that the nature of debt's completely changed from the last time there was a big moment on this. And actually there's a huge amount of expertise in those organisations that I need, and we want to support. But I mean, I hope that we don't just end up in a situation where it's all about inputs, which I think the kind of the 0.7 campaign, looking back, is all about what you put in, and actually we need to get to campaigning which is all about outcome. And I think NGOs understand that, most of them really well actually. And the other thing I think, which kind of ties to the earlier question about communication, was I think public, and this is, I mean, please tell me what you think, but I feel like the public in this country who've cared about this for a long time, they almost need a win where they're told, actually, because of what you've done over all these years, it's meant that this many women give birth safely, this many child mortality has improved to this extent, more and more children go to school. We need to tell people that this stuff works, because the impression many people have is that it's just an empty, it's a black hole we put money into, nothing ever gets better. That's not true. Things do get better as a consequence of the work that this country has led on development, and they deserve the credit for that, and we need to go back to them and tell them so.
Minister Janet.
Thank you, Chair. So, Minister, I just want to press you that the public perception of aid is really, really important, and there is a need for the government to have some type of communication strategy around this, just really to improve public confidence and the fact that it is taxpayers' money, and obviously we're, that ODA is at 0.3, but we need that to increase. And you have been mentioning some really positive things that have happened with the ODA spend around maternity and health and women's health, but we also know from evidence we've heard in this committee that that is rolling backward because of the reduction of the funds as well. But people need to hear about what's happening and what can happen, and but they also need to hear about how really to deal with the mismanagement of funds, and how the government is allaying the public's fears on that as well. So it's around having a really good communication strategy, and also dealing with people's levels of confidence to improve their confidence so that money is being spent well, and what the government is doing to make sure that it's spent responsibly as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think we haven't really tried to do that in a long time, but we should. So, I mean, I'm happy to come back with some sort of more something laid out on how we do that and get your views on it.
Minister, I also think the opposite. We would be very happy to come and chat with you. As you can see, we're a committee that loves chatting. And can I say to our team, we've got through a third of our questions, and we've got a little over half an hour left. So unless you answer succinct questions, we are not going to get the answers that we're seeking of the Minister, who has been very generous with her time. Minister, you are being very generous with your time. Can you be a little more brief as you're generous, please? Janet, back to you.
Yeah, so I think I'm pleased to hear that. It would be great to have you come back with some type of communication strategy or plan or draft. Would be really helpful. That's all, Chair. Thanks.
Did you want to ask about cash transfers?
Not unless you wanted to ask about that.
Minister, there was the Henry Jackson Society did a report recently, which was heavily covered in the Daily Mail, around the risk of exploitation for cash transfers. How do you combat that?
I think cash transfers, if there was one thing, so if WASH is the thing that Brian says is where public have a lot of confidence, cash transfers is the bit where they seriously don't. So we have to be really careful with this stuff. I pulled a project in Malawi because I felt it was not sufficiently targeted and it was undermining of public confidence. There are places and times when cash transfers are the best and most efficient way to work. And there are sort of emergency humanitarian disasters.
Very empowering, and it tends to go to women as well.
Exactly. So I think, we need to tread carefully, and we need to make sure wherever we do use this, we can absolutely, base it on evidence and experience, and there's data that says this is the only way to get, food and shelter to the population that desperately needs it. But there's no point us saying, because the data says it's right, that it's uncontroversial. So you do need to be really clear about what you're doing and why, and that you've got your systems there, and it's all properly accounted for, which
Thank you.
I think we're better than a lot of places at doing that.
A lot better. David, brackets, Brian Taylor.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about plans for a conference this year, and if you could elaborate on your current plans, and I suppose my specific interest, which won't surprise you, is whether or not you're any further along in discussions around development finance and using it as an opportunity to leverage in more money, working with the private sector and international finance facility and so on.
Yes, I mean we're getting on with it. We have a date now, which I don't think we've announced, but we've got it. So.
Share with us, Minister.
I don't know if I can.
Give us a month, Minister.
I'll give you a month, which is May.
We knew that already.
I knew it was May,
right,
yeah.
well, okay. So I haven't told you anything that I shouldn't have done in that case.
You can.
Later. So we've got to get some coherence around this, and I think that this is an opportunity for the UK to do something which is distinctly us. Yeah. So this cannot be the kind of conference you go to, nothing wrong with this, but you can go to it absolutely anywhere in the world, and we all say how important it is that we all work together on this, that and the other. Maybe you pledge a little bit of money and nothing actually changes as a consequence. Don't want to do that. We want to do something which moves the debate on. Where I'm thinking at the moment that we might want to look at is this issue of money and how you pay for things. And how we've got the emerging markets task force and all that work with the city. It's a brilliant opportunity to showcase that and the work we're doing on insurance, and to really expose more people to that. That will help with the communications piece, but it will also get more people, more confidence in. And I think the friends we have in the philanthropics and the tech sector are really interested in that. The other thing we should do is really look at technology and what, social media, big point of discussion for us this week. It's really big everywhere you go in the world, the impact that's having on democracies and participation, on women, how the emergency response rooms teams were able to devise an app in real time in the most difficult place to do anything on earth, to enable them to distribute resources fairly, quickly, to make sure that what they had got to the places that needed it and they could make quick decisions. All of this is not a sort of traditional development conference discussion.
And are you assuming it's going to be in the UK?
So we're looking at co-hosting. I think to do technology and finance, actually the UK is a good place to do it. It would be really interesting to do it somewhere else, but I think just being sort of pragmatic, and actually people like coming to the UK. But what I want it to be, I'm very, very keen that it's as outward facing and inclusive as it can be. So we involve sort of non-government figures.
Hybrid as well, please, Minister.
Oh, well, good point. Fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Otherwise you're immediately excluding people that can't afford it.
Yeah, visas.
Yeah.
And visas, of course, yes.
Yeah. No.
David?
Yeah, the sort of innovative finance side of it, I wondered if there's anything more you can sort of say on that point. It's okay if you can't. I just wanted to, I raised the question in House FCDO questions earlier, and
well done.
Very keen to see that the Treasury is working with you on this, because the point is that we don't want to go. We accept, or at least I do, the fiscal rules that the Chancellor set out. No one's seeking to break that, but there are innovative ways to not go against that, not undermine any credibility in the UK economy, but provide guarantees that enable us to leverage in more finance. And clever minds than me have great ideas about it. So yeah, just interested to know your perspective on that.
Well, we are having active conversations with the Treasury, and I think this is, however far we get by the development conference, the point of having the conference when we are is for it to lead onto the G20 the following year, where I think this could be an important part of that. I mean, obviously, the Cabinet Office is looking at what it wants to prioritise as part of that, but I think this is something where the UK has expertise. We've got the City of London. We're actually doing things already with the IFC, with ADF, we're showing. We're already making decisions that back ourselves on this, and we want to show that this works. And we need to give platform for partner government voices who will say, we want more of this, please. So the development conference is a chance to do that, and perhaps the conversations that we're having with the Treasury, which are really positive. Like, this isn't a one-sided thing by any means. They're genuinely interested in how we do this better. I'm quite optimistic that we'll get some progress. Whether we'll get it for May, who knows.
Minister, do you have plans to involve the committee in this?
I think we should. I mean, how would you like to be involved? We could get you on panels, or I don't know.
That would be great. I mean, we're hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be delivering our Future of Aid report to you, which will be sort of where we think, from the evidence we've received, and we've received over 200 pieces of evidence, the government ought to be focusing its attention. So hopefully that will give some guide or reinforce the areas that you're considering. It'd be really interesting to have your ideas in advance of what you want as the outcomes, so that we can see if you actually achieve them or not. We're a resource, we're well connected, and we've got an amazing committee team around us as well. So please do use us. Monica, you wanted to come in?
Just quickly, one of the most, or the best innovative finance function tools that I saw was the TFFF, and the committee wrote to you about that. First of all, it's great for public perception as well, because it's not, grant as we know it. Can you elaborate on what will happen to that? Whether there will be funding behind it?
From the UK?
From the UK.
If when we've done our due diligence it stacks up, then we would consider it for sure. I mean, what I was never going to do was agree to substantially commit to a fund because there was a big conference happening. That's not the way we make big decisions about money. Like, we've supported TFFF in getting it as far as it has got to, and we've worked with the Brazilians on sort of the technical support around that. But we need to understand a lot more about exactly how it's going to work. Will it be big enough to do what it says it wants to do? How will it make its decisions? What's the governance going to look like? Will it achieve its objectives? Before we can commit to taking part ourselves. The pressure that was on to make a decision by a particular weekend, I understood. I didn't feel that would be the right way to make that particular choice. But is it a good... I don't know yet if that's going to be the right place to put our climate money. It might well be. So,
Minister, you have written to us on this, and it's something that we're going to incorporate into our forthcoming climate finance inquiry.
Okay, good.
So we'll have a watching brief on that if you can keep us informed. Thank you. David Mundell.
Yes, Minister. What plans do you have for the resourcing and remit of ICAI going forward?
So, you asked me a lot about money for women and girls, money for WASH, all of these things. We spend about £5 million on ICAI a year. I have to ask myself, this is a prioritisation situation. I have to ask myself whether that's the right use of that money, or whether we could get what we need more efficiently. Is there a different way of enabling that accountability function to take place? I don't know the outcome of that at the moment, but I do think we do have to challenge ourselves on it. I understand why we need that mechanism that monitors what we do, as you do, and you, I know, value their reports, as do I. But I think it's wrong just to kind of carry on funding things in the same way we always have, when we're not doing that to any other area of our business.
So how will, though, you if you were to reduce the resources, ensure that there is ongoing external evaluation and scrutiny? Because we've heard in the previous discussion about getting public support that one of the rods that's used against development is money is not being well spent, and one of the things that ICAI have been able to do is to provide an external evaluation. Maybe that hasn't always got out to the public, but they are providing that to support the benefits, or in some cases the disbenefits of the spending. So how would it be achieved more cost effectively if you weren't investing in ICAI?
I think I recognise what you're saying. I think the question that I need to ask myself is, has that investment achieved what it was designed to do? And if part of it was around public confidence, I'd say no, it hasn't. It's done other things, and it has led to, we take the reports seriously, we respond to them, we adapt in response to what ICAI has to say, because it's good, thorough work. Is it something we can continue to do in the same way in the current context? I'm not sure. Haven't made a decision, and welcome thoughts on it, but it would be really odd to leave that unchanged while we're making substantial reductions in frontline services.
So what are the options then of a reduced ICAI or of something completely different?
Those are both options.
Right.
Leaving the things the same is an option. Asking the NAO to do it is an option. I haven't made a choice. If you have a view, I'd be really open to hearing it.
Minister, if I can just say, as I'm sure you're aware, that this committee has statutory oversight of ICAI. So if you are going through this thought process, we would really welcome early oversight of that, because it is something that we need to be involved in.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
To answer the question from a technical point of view, you asked what are the ways in which we have oversight. Well, of course, there's the NAO. Every programme we have requires us to have some kind of third-party assessment of our evidence, so that's baked into our programme operating framework. There's also aid transparency indices that we are involved with and have led some of those initiatives. And then, of course, we also have internal audits. So there are multiple ways, and we have the IDC as well that scrutinises and reports. There are multiple ways in which we look at the impact of programmes already.
Thank you, Brian.
Some quick-fire questions on staffing, Minister, and Melinda, you might like to add in as well. First of all, have you managed to move faster than Ollie Robbins to make sure you have the staff you need to deliver your vision for ODA?
I think we're outpacing Ollie Robbins quite well.
Girls.
Yeah. What Ollie needs to... So he's doing something really hard, and he's trying to deal with the fact that we have sort of 30% more people than we did 10 years ago, even allowing for the merger. And he can't just... that's very strange and needs to be addressed. We also need to think about how the world has changed, what the skills are that we need as an FCDO. Within that, I need to make sure that he doesn't make decisions that leave us unable to deliver our development strategy. I think because we made some early choices, because we've been really clear on what it is we're trying to do, that he knows what it is that we need, and I meet him and tell him in no uncertain terms what that should look like. One of the things that he and I support him in his sort of ambition and mission. It matters to me as a sort of lifelong trade union member that this is done properly and fairly, and communication is good, consultation is done correctly.
Do you think that is happening?
I do.
Because
I
the
do,
unions
but
don't.
Sorry?
The unions don't.
No, they are challenging back, and so they should. I'm assured that it is, but watching brief on this. We've done, or Ollie has done, the senior roles and has taken, that has not been easy or straightforward, of course, but I think that's the right way round to do it, to make the jobs to make that cutting of the senior roles first, and then logic, it's slightly more straightforward. They do need to now make some more changes and need to be get into more of the restructuring side of things, where there is more of a broadly understood process that needs to be undertaken. I don't, for 1 second think that this is straightforward, and we need to maintain the clarity that we have around what communities of expertise are going to look like, what in-country teams need to have, what skills we need. We need to be, if we're going to do a lot more on finance and private sector and private public market mobilisation, that's a very different skill set to some of the things we've had in the past. So there's a question that we're currently asking ourselves about how much reskilling do you do, and how much do some people not want to be part of that when you need to do some new recruitment to fill those roles. So there's a lot happening. I feel that it is my job to get that clarity in front of those decision makers so they can make those choices. You've lived this though, Melinda, I don't know.
So we've done the senior layer. We're now doing the next layer down, which is the director layer. And those directors are then responsible for designing their departments with the capabilities that the Minister describes. And we're also building a capability for the whole of the FCDO, the British Diplomatic Academy. Mm-hmm. So the test falls in terms of how much resource, how much expertise, how much capability can sit within each of the directorates, how they work across each other, and how the whole network relates to the country network. So the overseas network review is part of that puzzle as well.
Can I just bring Tracy in on this?
Just on that specific point, how confident are you that the directors and the interim directors have the necessary understanding and development of those directorates to be making the workforce changes that are currently underway?
So as someone who has spent a lot of time interviewing prospective directors, because we've asked these questions about technical skills as part of the overall interview alongside the competencies. So very confident that the directors that we have in place are a really top calibre group of people that are both diplomats but also technical experts where they need to be.
When we were speaking to trade unions, it just kind of felt like it might be the other way round. That they were making decisions, were put into departments before they knew what the department looked like, and then having to make those cuts. So there's a great concern about that loss of expertise, as Brian had referred to.
So I think actually all of these things, although we describe them sequentially, are in effect going on at the same time. So we have a view about the capability that we need, we've got a view about the size of the departments that we're going to be able to structure around. We've got a sense, because we've worked on these projects over a long period of time, what the capabilities are that we need to build. So although it sounds linear, actually it's more iterative, and it's based on processes happening more or less at the same time.
Thank you, Brian.
Minister, have you seen a workforce plan or skills audit?
I have for the area of the business that I'm responsible for.
The two directorates.
Melinda's presented me with that. But I mean, just to be absolutely clear about it, like I'm a minister. It would be highly inappropriate for me to get involved in kind of the sort of HR decisions, but I do make it my business to make sure that I need Melinda to assure me that the organisation that Ollie and Nick Dyer and she are building will be able to deliver the strategy that I'm responsible for.
It does exist.
Minister, let me just sort of push you a little bit on that. I wouldn't expect you at all to get involved in the HR side of things, but it is your responsibility to come up with the policy priorities and communicate those. So you're assured that your priority and the Foreign Secretary's priority policies have been relayed, so that the team that you're going to get will have the skills you need to deliver.
Yes. Absolutely right.
Okay. And the last of my little questions, are there some directors being asked to model savings and or reductions of more than 25%?
Well, we've cut our budget by 40%, so we've been doing nothing but that. What do you mean about individual?
Staffing. Oh, right. Staffing, yeah.
I mean, I would imagine. I mean, please correct.
Yes.
Yeah, we'd have to, because we're not just. This isn't just a salami slicing exercise. there will be more emphasis on some things and far less on others. So that is kind of inevitable, really.
So we've been told that the development directorates are being asked to model 40% to protect the more strategic, for example, NATO and Commonwealth directives.
Should I jump in?
I mean, I've got a view, but yeah, go on then.
Do you want to go first?
Well, my response to that is I don't think it any longer really makes sense to say this is a development directorate in the way that it used to be. We have one of the things I'm trying to get away from is this sort of separation of purpose around the building, and I think it's great that you now have former DFID members of staff who are heads of mission, so Ethiopia, really good example. You also have former FCO purely diplomatic team members who are development directors in Bangladesh. So this is everything we do needs to be sort of interdisciplinary, complementary. So that isn't the sort of way that I'm thinking about it. But Melinda.
So two things. Firstly, in this new structure, there's no directorate that is exclusively development. So the expectation is they layer in some concentrated programs, but they have diplomacy, they do policy, they do multilateral, they do network support. So no, there's no development directorate, as it were, as we had before. We've spread it across the piece, which is interesting because it means more of the directorates also in security need to factor, for example, migration, need to factor in development thinking and ODA planning. That's the first thing. The second thing is no directorate's been asked to go up to 40%. And some that have almost gotten to that point are there because we've merged 3 or 4 different directorates and there's lots of overlap. So actually the efficiency can be made and the outcomes won't necessarily be impacted, but the efficiency does need to be made. In other directorates, which are heavy spend, such as international finance or economic development and economic growth, actually the cut is much less. So we've really looked hard at this to make sure development is embedded right across the FCDO. It will have more power and pack more of a punch that way, and then taken a perspective of which of the capabilities within development we need to build, private capital, international finance, which can we seek efficiencies and which do we reduce.
I think part of the problem, Minister, is that we're fumbling around in the dark over this, and it's a massive change to FCDO, but particularly to development, both the cuts and the staffing. So I dread to think how it must feel, particularly for the more junior level staff who are actually having to live this, because our job is only to scrutinise it. I think the sooner you can get that clarity out, because we were told that the decisions were being made before Christmas, and then it was January, and then it was February, and it's I mean, these are mortgages, these are children's schools, these are, also some of the poorest people in the world who are looking to know if their scheme's going forward or not. So the more transparent and the quicker you can get this done, the better. But I think part of the problem is the unions that we're speaking to feel equally in the dark, so they are unable to either give guidance or reassurance. And whilst I hear you saying that they are fully engaged, they might be fully engaged, but they're not getting all the information that they're requesting. So anything you could do on that, Minister, I'd be really grateful. Yeah. And to give you one example, we wrote to you on the 27th of November about some very specific things relating to staffing, and we've still not had a reply. So it is not the easiest thing to engage with right now, and your intervention hopefully would smooth the passage and help everyone.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We've got a few quick fires on topics. As I was walking into the meeting, there were pictures circulating of Israeli bulldozers bulldozing what's proclaimed to be the UNRWA site in East Jerusalem. I don't know if you can confirm that that is the case, but for me, a UN member bulldozing a UN facility is completely off the scale, unacceptable, and I don't want to hear condemnation. If you can confirm that that is what's happening, I want to hear what we're actually going to do about it.
I can't confirm that. I've not been briefed on it. I think it'd be a really bad idea for me to say anything on that at all, given that the first I've heard of it is from you just now.
Okay. So could I move on to the 37 NGOs who have been, I think the term is deregistered?
Yeah.
And again, you know, please don't tell me that we condemn it and it's not acceptable. What are we doing on the ground to try and get those vital services to the people that need them?
Well, we don't agree with it, and we think it's the wrong thing to do, and we make that point repeatedly, and we speak to others to encourage them to make that point as well. I met with Tom Fletcher last week, and this is one of the conversations that we had about how we work with those, and we met with some of the NGOs affected as well, and they're you know, some of them are in quite a difficult position. About, you know, they're being asked to compromise some of the ways that they feel they should work in order to carry on.
They're in a hugely compromised position.
It's really difficult. So, you know, the important thing for us is that we stand by those organisations that need us to, but that we work through the agencies that are able to get access to maximum effect. But I mean, this is just one of a list of problems that we've got at the moment. I mean, yes, things are improved since the ceasefire, but you know, if anyone thinks that this means that all the aid is flowing and it's getting where it should do, I mean, it really isn't. We've still got issues with dual use and getting access. All the crossings aren't open. You know, still huge problems. Things are a bit better. IPC assessments have said we're no longer in as dire a situation as we were, but there's still, you know, a lot that we need to be doing to, you know, to get the aid and the access where it needs to be.
And what about things like the planning permission on the E1, which effectively completely ring fences East Jerusalem?
Well, we have a clear position on that. Minister Faulkner's made that. You know, he's argued for that shouldn't be happening, and that's a conversation that we continue to have, because I think particularly following our recognition announcement of Palestine, you know, it's a logical position for us to take is around making sure that you know, these sorts of things are being done deliberately to frustrate that the viability of a Palestinian state.
And on that, I'm still waiting for the name of the Palestinian that's going to be on the Oversight Committee for Gaza. How are we involved in that? Are we involved in that?
I would have to talk to Minister Faulkner about where he's got to and where that is. We've argued for a Palestinian committee as part of the process, and that's only really happening because we've made that case. We feel very strongly that there needs to be Palestinian voice and representation in decisions that are made now. This is a dynamic situation, and you know, I think understanding of what the Board of Peace looks like and the limitations of what it would be responsible for, how people are involved, what the governance arrangements are for that is a little more fluid than we initially thought when the resolution was passed at the UN. So we are closely involved, but we haven't shifted from our sort of principal position about the necessity for Palestinian representation.
And also in the rebuilding.
Yes, absolutely.
Monica, we're going to shift to Sudan now, if that's okay.
Sudan, in 5 minutes, will not give it any justice at all. And as I know you're personally committed to, and I know your team and the team in the Foreign Office are, clearly it's the biggest humanitarian disaster since aid records began. The scale of the killing in El Fasher, with the UK as penholder on the UN Security Council, shows perhaps how little leverage we have on it. But my question really is, since we last spoke to you here, what specific actions has the UK taken, or have you taken, to further diplomatic engagement around humanitarian access and the ending of the war?
This is a massive priority for the Foreign Secretary. I'm really proud of the way that she's come in and gripped this, and she has very few conversations where she doesn't raise Sudan, which I think is absolutely right. We, all of us, when we talk to our counterparts, either in the US or in Gulf states or in the region, will emphasise the point about humanitarian access, but also the necessity for a pause in the fighting. And there are various processes going on diplomatically, which you will be aware of, and we are as involved as we can be in those, and through the accountability measures that we've instigated by the UN, and we are, completely. We will stay the course on this for as long as it takes. One of when we spoke to Tom Fletcher last week at length about Sudan, he was telling us that the UN has got to El Fasher, and the reports that we've not yet received. I mean, I don't think the world is fully aware of the horrors and the scale of it. When that happens, I think there will be a spotlight on some people. I don't want to this is very sensitive diplomatically, and it's not for me to kind of announce big things here on this particular issue this afternoon. But it will be very uncomfortable for people who have, knowingly or otherwise, enabled this situation to come about. And I think the pressure of the world's focus on this will, soon I hope, lead to some kind of pause in the fighting, because that has to happen to give us the space to then talk about where we go next.
Minister, I'm assuming you're talking about UAE and Saudi Arabia.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just, we all know that this isn't just a situation of two warring parties in a country happening in isolation. And it's not just one or two other countries. This is part of a whole wider regional situation, going as far as the Horn of Africa, Yemen.
As the development minister who's having to deal with the consequences of civilians being slaughtered, is it not your place to be able to call out UAE and Saudi Arabia for having
I will
a proxy
call
war?
out whoever I think needs calling out at a time when I think calling out people brings about an improvement in the situation. That's the only test I apply.
Can I push you a bit further? You talk about your focus on it, which is really welcome. Would that therefore translate to more Foreign Office development staff on the ground in and around Sudan, more than there are at the moment?
We've increased our team of staff working on Sudan already substantially. We generally work through partners on the ground because they can get the access, and we talked about the Africa Development Bank earlier, but we work through UN agencies, through the IRC and others, and I've been to see what they do. FCDO doesn't deliver services, it never has, direct services in that way in those contexts. We always work through partners. So I think, it would be brilliant to be in a situation where there was such a surge in humanitarian activity that we needed more people in Chad and in Sudan to be able to be present, to work alongside. At the moment, though, we are heavily restricted, and we are completely working through agencies and partners.
Being there and being able to talk to the various groups, old-style diplomacy may be the only thing that gets through at the moment.
Yes, but there are limits when you're talking about warring generals who've been at it for years. I think there are pressures that we need to exert as an international community that the UK alone, no country alone actually, even the biggest and most powerful country, can actually by itself bring about the change that we need. This needs to be a concerted effort.
And you talked last time you came about diaspora groups and meeting with them to discuss Sudan. How's that happened?
I want to do more of that. Last week though, I went to an art exhibition. I don't get the chance to do things like that very often, but this was a project where they were showcasing Sudanese art, and they had some very well-known artists, and it was great to their purpose in doing this was to show that Sudan isn't just conflict, that there is a rich history and a vibrant cultural life emanating from Sudan, and they were very proud of it. And they did talk a little bit about the conflict, but actually they wanted to talk about their country and why they love it so much and how proud they are to be Sudanese.
Thank you. Brian.
Quick one. Minister, is there a mechanism that the FCDO has to talk to the African Union about Sudan or indeed other things? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we have a good relationship with the African Union, and I've been invited to speak at their conference next month, I think, or in March. And I'm told that this is the first time this has happened in a very, very long time. So it's seen as an improvement in that relationship, but they are, an essential partner for us.
So, but that will be at a conference.
Yes.
Is there any direct kind of like?
Yeah. I mean, we have. I think we've got somebody. Yeah, we have an envoy at the African Union permanently, and I regularly meet representatives because I think. I mean, what they always say, and I think they're right, is you need African solutions to African issues. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, Yemen, another country in conflict, similar players having their proxy wars, and another country we're the penholder to. What diplomatic steps are we taking to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in that country, and how are we working with local actors to deliver the support that's needed?
Well, we have to work with local actors because, I mean, especially in the north of Yemen, I think, I can't remember the number, but UN team members being held. Minister Faulkner was there quite recently. Again, it's another context where actually the wider regional dynamics are at play, and it's really difficult to completely separate these things from one another. So we are working with the United Nations again on access where we can in the south, and working through local partners. It is difficult, to put it mildly, but we have a particular responsibility, I think, because of history and our penholder status. But there's no easy, quick answer, I don't think.
Final question from me, and then I'm turning to David Trucker-Mundell. I don't know if you heard the interview by Antonio Guterres on the UN General Secretary on 2 days ago, I think it was. Talking.
It was only yesterday.
You're joking.
I know. It's one of those weeks.
It really is. Talking about how the UN needed to change itself, how the world had changed so dramatically, and how development actually offered an awful lot of the solutions to the problems that we now face, at the same time as many of us in the world are stepping away from development work. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that. And you talked about multilaterals earlier on, but I wonder if you can talk about how we're helping shape. So, for example, we have the pen holder for various different things. He was putting forward the argument that the people that make up the UN Security Council actually need to be broadened or different or changed, and the veto scheme is no longer, well, it makes a joke of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I had long conversations with the Secretary General the weekend. He met with the Foreign Secretary as well, and I think I'm pretty sure he met with the Prime Minister. And what he's talking about is the need for the UN to change, and we agree. And I think the US clearly agrees with that as well. Perhaps our ideas of how it should change may differ. But there is no doubt that, and it's right, we completely support the UN, and if it didn't exist, we would be working really hard to create it right now. And for all it's, it's frustrating, it can be slow, it can be, there are these issues with veto and the Security Council at the moment. All of that is true. And there is, other ways of organising internationally around the coalition of the willing and that kind of thing that are emerging as a response to some of that. But that's not all the UN is. And I think the UN does some phenomenal work that nobody else could do at the scale and speed that it manages to do. And without a doubt, there needs to be this process of change. There are too many different organisations operating in a country, requiring things of the host government, not coordinating with each other. It's inefficient. all of that needs to be dealt with, and the Secretary General is very clear that that's his job to do that. But I think it's our job, well, we sort of hold the UN to account and we instigate change and demand. Then there are some specific changes that I would like to see, which we spoke about. But through all of that, we do it from a position of support and as a critical friend who wants to do this because we really believe in what the UN stands for and what it can do. We're not people who think that it's irrelevant or it's a bit of a nuisance or it's out of date or it doesn't have a role in the future. It absolutely does.
And both the UN and the Geneva Conventions are, and I use the word deliberately, are basically based on gentlemen's agreements to do the honourable thing. There are laws around them, which we are seeing increasingly being broken, breached, pushed, challenged, and perhaps most importantly from our point of view, not enforced. Yeah. So I would say one of the core values of Britain is that we do follow the rule of law. So do you also see both your part of FCDO, but FCDO as a whole and this government as a whole doing more on the international stage to enforce and remind our friends and our enemies about the rule of law and observing it?
Yeah, I think that's probably more important now than it's ever been. And we've done some really interesting work through Geneva Call on IHL and with armed groups in Colombia and things like we do. We really do believe in this. I think though what you see is where our sort of desire to do this through consensus and through persuasion and advocacy, where the limit of that lies.
Yes, very much.
And there's no point pretending that there's ever been a sort of golden era where that hasn't been tested, but it's very, very visible now because of the way that it's being tested. Does that mean we give up and stop making those arguments and explaining why we believe in those things? Absolutely not. But this has never been a simple sort of. There's never been a consensus around this completely in the way that we would like to see, but we keep going.
And I would argue that with democracies and people under democracies shrinking ever further, it now is absolutely the time when we stand up very robustly to those that are challenging it. The last two questions are from David Mundell.
Yes, I want Minister to ask you about two specific subjects in which we've discussed before. One is HIV and the target to eradicate new transmissions globally by 2030. And when the APPG met you, we acknowledged that you had got what we perceived to be the best possible deal on the global fund in all the circumstances that you faced. But in order for the UK to maintain that leadership, there are other organisations that we do need to support, such as the Robert Carr Fund, UnitAid and UNAIDS. So can you give us some hope that when you make your various announcements that the support will be there for those organisations, because that is essential to complement the Global Fund to achieve that objective?
I can't say everything that you've listed will be protected, because if I did that, everyone would just ask me for their 4 or 5 things, and then we'd have nothing to announce. But I understand what you're saying and why you're saying it, and I think we did do the right thing with the Global Fund, not least because of the brilliant lobbying that we had in Parliament. That was really effective, and the job that the leader of the Global Fund, Peter Sands, did internationally. It was really good to see the US actually join to the extent that they did as well. It was really powerful. How we coordinate and work through UN organisations, Robert Carr and others, I think that does need to be brought together, and we need to have conversations about what in 2026 is the right way to get the impact, given the changes in technology and some of the shifts that we're seeing more widely. That I think is a sort of moment where we have those conversations. What that means for funding, let's the allocations will be published soon. But whatever they are, I think our commitment to working alongside those organisations that have proved themselves really effective, that isn't going to change.
And I'm just going to ask you to continue with the UK's investment in the Child Nutrition Fund,
Yes.
because on the nutrition front, that is almost the single most effective contribution that we can make.
Thank you. Minister, thank you so much. Melinda, I also appreciate you coming. Thank you ever so much. You gave us loads of evidence. You put some cats back into boxes. Hopefully it's not a Schrodinger and they'll be alive when we open the box. But thank you very much for your time. Order, this session is